What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 83 of the Around the Crease podcast. This week, I have Transylvania Associate Head Coach John Otto, and we're going to talk about Division III lacrosse, what are some of the differences between that and Division I, and what recruiting is like, and what he can and cannot do. And we're starting now. All right, I'm here with Coach Logan Otto. He's the Associate Head Coach at Transylvania University Men's Lacrosse in Kentucky. Coach, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast this week.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Mike. This is awesome. A long-time listener here, and excited to be on here.
Yeah, and I'm pumped to have you on and kind of talk about the Division III layout and kind of how that your guys. We're going to talk mostly about the recruiting stuff and kind of get your take on that. But before we kind of dive into all that stuff, why don't you kind of fill people in on like who is Transylvania, like what you guys are about, and kind of give us a description.
Yeah. So we are a Division III program in the heart of downtown Lexington, Kentucky. We're not your traditional Division III is, a lot of smaller schools that are kind of in rural areas or small towns. We are right dead center in downtown Lexington, and Lexington's a really cool city. 30,000 college students in the city, 300,000 in the city. I like to call it the biggest small town. Everybody sort of knows everyone, but at the same time, there's so much to do with the SEC football. We're like 2 blocks away from Rupp Arena. We won't go into that Evansville loss last night too much, but there's just a lot to do, and it's a great campus, and we have tremendous support from our president and AD, Dr. Sheely, and she really values lacrosse and the Division III athletic experience for our students. So it's a great place. I've been there 6 seasons now. And working with Terry Justice, our head coach, who's built this program into something really special, and it's been a lot of fun to see it grow.
Yeah. I'm going to kind of give you the chance to make the pitch. Like, what is it whenever you go into, recruits calling you, or, maybe they come to your office, like, what's usually the pitch? Like, how do you guys kind of sell the program on a recruit or a parent?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, there's definitely the Division III student athlete experience is so unique, and I think it provides a great opportunity for students because you get really that true student feel, and that's the same way at Transylvania. We have a lot of majors that are marked out and kind of navigated by the student, and we've got some great partnerships with some major universities. So we have like a 4-1 engineering program with the University of Kentucky. We've had a few young men graduate through that with like a physics or mathematics degree, and then they've bypassed the master's program and gone into PhD programs at UK, and most of them are getting some major award money there and working as research assistants and teaching assistants. And then a lot of young men in pre-med and exercise sciences, education. There's just so many opportunities, and at the same time we're in a really exciting part of our program where we're building the program up to not only make it to the NCAA tournament and win a conference championship, but continue to build towards competing at the highest level we possibly can and make a splash as a Midwest or, Southern school. We're in that awkward, Kentucky isn't Midwest, is it Southeast?
Right.
But we love what we're doing here, and we also love that we can help in the growth of the Bluegrass State, in lacrosse at the local level as well. So it's a great place. I love it here.
Yeah, I was going to say, you guys, I guess if you're a Kentucky fan, you're probably SEC. To be honest, that's how I end up. It's funny because when I was kind of doing my divisions on on Lax records, I was like, all right, how do I figure out where I put some of these states? Like even Texas, like I was like, where do I put them?
Yeah.
I looked at a lot of the major football alignments. I was like, well, Kentucky's in the SEC, so probably there, because it could have gone easily Midwest, but it was just kind of like,
Right.
where. Of course, the way football alignments go nowadays. Give it 5 years, who knows where anybody will be at that point. It kind of
Absolutely.
all blow that theory up, but it's a little behind the curtain on how I kind of decided where everybody went there. So yeah, that's great. And you mentioned you guys are a D3 program, and also kind of in Kentucky. But I talked to quite a few like D1 coaches in the previous few podcasts, and we've kind of talked about the recruiting process. And most people are, at least have a tangential idea of what the recruiting process for D1, just because it's so much bigger, considering all the other major sports. But for D3, like, what's that recruiting process like for you guys?
Yeah, it's a really cool experience. I think for me, coming into college coaching, because I was originally a high school English teacher and coached at the high school level in the state of Kentucky in Lexington, just down the road, and it was a unique opportunity to jump into it. So as I kind of learned how to recruit at the D3 level and at the college level, one of the most fun things and greatest bits of advice I learned from our head coach Terry Justice was just let's be a school that really makes things personalized.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had to send that 5,000 form letter after an event, dear, and then it says recruit name. Those are coach's nightmare. But for me, everything's been very personalized. So what we do is we hit the road in the summer and the fall and winter and catch events and kind of find our niche events that we really like and look for the players that we feel can help us elevate. I mean, every year it's about finding the next guy who can push our players currently in the program, and for those guys currently in the program to push our new recruits. So, we really just hit the road and then create those relationships through email first, and then, text and call. But for sure, the big thing I like to tell our guys in the recruitment process is you've got a lot going on. I'm not going to be the guy who beats up your phone all week, so I just like to check in on them and, eventually get them down to campus to see what we're building.
Yeah. So what do you guys, or as a D3 program, like what may or may you not do differently than like, say, a Division I guy?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is there's certainly timelines, right? With there's only so many spots, and that, trickles down all the way to D3 from D1 and D2 down. But I think for us, one of our biggest philosophies is that we really want our guys to make sure they make the right decision. So we don't really put a lot of stress on timelines. What we want is, we say to guys, there are two major decisions in your life: who you marry and where you go to college, and you don't want to mess those up.
Yeah.
So we really want guys to be 100% bought in on Transylvania University Lacrosse and going to school here and what we're doing. So we feel that we just kind of build that relationship. We usually know by about, December or January, most of the guys, but, Division III and just in the college recruitment world, guys fall into your lap and say, hey, I just kind of stumbled upon your university, or this didn't work out and I'm really interested. And so there's always a little bit of unique elements towards the end of the spring season even.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned a little bit of the timeline. Like, if I know I have a lot of parents that listen to the podcast and kind of curious, because obviously the big deals are made again of D1. But what's the timeline for general, like, and obviously everybody's going to be a little bit different. But for you guys, like, what are the timelines you're kind of looking at as far as like maybe when you start looking at a player, maybe what year they are in high school, and then maybe when you start reaching out, and then even to the point where you kind of start to expect like that verbal commitment.
Sure. So as far as our engagement to a recruit, in the process, we're really looking at that junior summer, sophomore year into junior summer to kind of really locate the guys we're looking at, see what they're bringing, and kind of start that relationship. But we're not really going into that sophomore year or anything like that. It's just too early. And, that craziness has kind of run its course in lacrosse, which has, I think, been very beneficial to the Midwest and a lot of the, non-hotbed locations.
Yeah.
So then as they get into their senior year, the biggest thing, a huge piece of our program is the visit, and we want them to come on campus. And I can tell you as much as I can about Transylvania Lacrosse, but I really want you to meet our guys and get a feel for our program in the locker room and our practices. And are these guys going to be guys that you're going to spend 4 years with, really competing and committing to the process and enjoying the classroom element and the social element? I mean, that's important. And that's really, the next step, getting them on campus, meeting the guys. And then from there, of course, the unique part of Division III is just the application process, and obviously the differences between D2 and D1, and merit-based and financial aid. Those things are just vastly different. So it kind of makes it a little longer for Division III and waiting those things out.
You mentioned the because that's one of our later questions, but you kind of opened the door as far as like that financial part. Like, how does that differ between D1 and D2?
Yeah, I mean, in Division three, we're not able to offer any scholarships based on athletics. So everything is about the student element. So, we're looking for guys who are leaders, that are participating in many programs. And then, of course, that GPA and test score is important. But, at our university, we have a test optional program, which is really cool because, there's a lot of young people that, don't test well and are definitely hard workers and will do well in our academic setting. It's a tough school, but if you put forth the work, our professors are going to reward you. And I love that test optional element in our admissions process. But I always tell parents all the time. Sometimes they get to their senior fall tournaments and they go, "What do we do? Do I play club ball or do I do an ACT prep course for that last?" And I'm like, "Prep course, no doubt.
Yeah,
it saves you thousands."
Yeah, yeah. So we kind of talked about the timelines and stuff like that. I kind of want to go back real quick because obviously you mentioned the rule change and as far as like the timeline, I guess, and I kind of agree. Like almost every coach and every player I talk to now has just kind of raved about the rule change. I mean, I think if we've talked, Brennan O'Neill might be a once in a generation player for many reasons, but he also might be the last guy we hopefully ever see as commit as an eighth grader in that process too. And I kind of really agree. Like that rule has probably helped maybe more kids in like the non-hotbed areas than anywhere else because I mean, a kid on Long Island, he has the opportunity to get seen a lot more, but a kid in Kentucky may not have that visibility because who's really thinking about an eighth grader in Kentucky to begin with? Like, no one really should have been thinking about an eighth grader on Long Island, but is what it is because it's the legends get around there a lot easier. But even with that, like being you guys are D3, like as far as being able to talk to underclassmen and things like that, like is there any difference between you guys and some of the other levels?
Well, the Division three rules are a little bit more relaxed than the Division one and Division two element of them. So for us, the big thing is the main rule we really have to abide by is that January 1st junior year official visit time. So getting them on campus to do an official. That's the main one. Otherwise, we can really communicate with underclassmen. But, we don't really hit up a lot of sophomores or anything like that. So we tend to take our time and find the right guys and get to know them a little bit more before we get too formal at that age.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it's probably, I guess if a sophomore is expressing interest in you guys, that's not a bad thing. But then again, it's like you want to make sure they've had their opportunity to also explore their options because, again, almost every coach I talk to, it's like, it's not just about, playing lacrosse in college. It's like, you really want to make sure you got the right fit. Like you guys are in downtown Lexington, you mentioned, like, 300,000 people, like that's not a small town. Like, I went to Mount St. Mary's, which the population of Emmitsburg is about 3,000 people. So, I mean, and that's a Division One program. So it's like, do you want a city of 300,000? Do you appreciate being in a downtown area or do you want something more rural? Like there's a lot of things to consider. And I think some of that comes with age and maturity to figure out like what you want. I mean, I talked to many kids who like, they grew up in a downtown area and they're like, I don't want to live down, I don't want to go to school there. It's like they go swing the opposite way. So I think taking that time. So again, but it also doesn't hurt to like if they think they're interested in Transylvania or a D3 program, it's like, maybe it might give you a little bit more option because you can't talk to the D1 guys, but they could talk to you guys, at least get some, feedback on whether or not, the coaching staff. I mean, so much of it is coaching staff as well. And that fit in the college, like, also, I know a lot of people say, like, you can't really, like, I don't think it happens in lacrosse quite as much as maybe some of the other sports, but as far as, like, the guy that recruited you may not be there, when you get there, so you got to be a part of the school. Like, again, I don't think it happens in lacrosse. Like, I always think of the NBA and football guys who jump ship, but, it's still, it's always there. It does happen.
Sure.
So,
especially with the recruitment assistants do at every level, they build those relationships and opportunities come up. So I definitely understand that.
Yeah. So we've kind of gone through some of the D3 process, but still I think the number one question that everybody gets, and you kind of brought it up a little bit as far as you guys picking events, but if you're giving advice to like a player or a parent, when they're trying to choose which events to send their kid to, because as you know, there is a lot to choose from nowadays.
Yes.
And I mean, we're recording this on November 13th. We're kind of in the middle of that, that very short span where you guys are out there doing the recruiting again and checking out kids. But how do players and parents, what's your recommendation for players and parents, when they're trying to decide, event A or event B or, event Z in most cases, trying to sort through all those?
Yeah, there's so many options and obviously a lot of financial decisions to be made there. I also run a club program with one of my really good friends who played at Birmingham Southern in Jacksonville. His name's Ben Schaefer. We've been running Commonwealth Kings for almost 9 years, and it's been really rewarding. But at the same time, you have to look into these conversations a lot because these guys go and play at one event. And all of a sudden they're bombarded with 10 showcases, right? And which one do I go to and financially and I always tell our guys, make a list, of about 10 to 20 schools, that they're really interested in. And then, they have to be realistic, right? I mean, all of us want to go to Syracuse. I know I did. I watched Mikey Powell and, I said either I want to go to Syracuse or Princeton, Ryan Boyle or Mikey Powell, right? But I was really a Division III lacrosse player, and that was kind of my talent level. So I try to tell guys, what's your long shots? What's your schools lacrosse-wise you're really interested at, multiple levels? And then what are you interested in school-wise? Because there's so many opportunities.
Yeah.
And the other thing is just you have to ask yourself, when do you want to play? If you want an opportunity to play early, there's just so many great opportunities at the Division III level, to make an impact on a program. But with the events, kind of circling back to that, I tell them to look at, the previously attending schools and what fits within their budget, because sometimes traveling from, Louisville, Kentucky and going to Long Island for a showcase is going to be really tough.
Yeah.
And it's a serious financial commitment. So, I tell guys all the time, pick and choose a couple opportunities. The schools you're really interested, that's definitely a time where you can think about your prospect day. And those type of situations, the ones you're really serious about and getting a feel for their program, it's almost like committing to a visit, except you get to practice and be coached up. And I tell them to take that into account. There's so many opportunities. It's a great thing. But the last thing you want is, your family to go crazy spending a ton of money, and then you may end up somewhere right in your backyard potentially.
Right. That's an interesting point you made because, I guess I always kind of refer to it as almost self-awareness, like kids trying to figure out where they fit. And it's funny because I posted a quote from an interview I did with Coach Tierney at Denver from years ago, saying if a kid's getting 20 offers from D3 schools and one offer from a D1, he may have to come to the realization that he may be a D3 player. And so, not surprisingly, a lot of people kind of push back, thinking there's always that, don't let people tell you where you go. But I think there's a lot of truth in that. So, when you're talking to your kids, how do you kind of steer them into that, being realistic? Because, again, you wanted to go to Syracuse or Princeton. How was it for you? What kind of made you realize that, all right, maybe that's not the best fit for me? And how do you kind of relay that to a kid now to kind of be don't waste your money going to a bunch of D1 schools if, you may be a D3 guy?
I saw that quote, and I think there's a lot of truth to that, what Coach Tierney said, and definitely recognize that. And, with our guys, I tell a story of, our co-director, I mentioned him earlier, Ben Schaefer. Mm-hmm. He started playing lacrosse when he was in, I think, his 9th grade year, just picked up a stick. And, I used to drive by this park and he'd be running hills. And I'd be like, man, that kid's really trying hard. We'll see if he, and it turned out, by his senior year, he was a high school All-American. He went to Birmingham Southern College and was all everything there, and is just one of the best players I've been on a field with. And, took a grad year and played at Jacksonville. So he really understands the whole process through it. Mm-hmm. And I try to tell guys all the time, are you willing to turn the lights on the hill at Veterans Park and run sprints and do cone work and shoot and just keep shooting? Because that's a real element of what it takes to compete at that level. And, Division three has so many great players. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've watched a guy play on the opposite side of the field against us, and I've gone, how is that kid not, playing at the highest level possible? But it's they found the right fit for them,
Yeah.
and you just have to do that research. But yeah, I just try to guide them through it, and I ask them, this is a typical schedule of a Division One, and I use some of our former club players and what they've told me, and we've had guys go to Colgate. We've had guys go to Washington and Lee, and we've had guys play at Transylvania, all over the country. So I look at those schedules and those commitments, and I say, what do you want, and what are you studying? Because you have to be ready for the demands of every different level.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I don't want to say it gets lost in the shuffle, but I hear I hear a lot like D1 or bust, like I want to play D1,
Mm-hmm.
and I always think about it's like sometimes the academics thing doesn't get stressed enough, and I was not a college athlete, did not have the skill set, but it's like I chose a place that had the education that I want, and I don't think it really should be a lot different for school. Like I grew up in North Carolina. It was one of those things like. And you had to choose early. Like when you were a kid, it's like everybody was like, "Do you want?" Because Duke was still a burgeoning program of basketball. They weren't the powerhouse then, so it was like UNC or NC State. And it was when it was like there was a division, like the technical college of North Carolina State versus the more liberal arts education of UNC. That wasn't the conversation at the time. You were picking a basketball program for. Turns out the rest of your life at that point in time, at 5 years old. But that really kind of is this thing too. It's like it's like, do you prefer, like, you don't go, if you want to be a farmer in North Carolina, you don't go to UNC. Like it's kind of one of those things. So it's not a whole lot different when you're looking at various schools. You mentioned the medical program at Transylvania. It's like if that's kind of what you want to do for the next 40 years, you got to look at what the fit is outside. Even along with everything else, like all that stuff,
Absolutely.
the athletic and academic factors. And I have to say that because I can't stress it enough, because so many times I hear about the athletic side, and even but every coach always mentions the academic side, but I think that gets lost a little bit in the shuffle. So I'll get off my bandwagon, get off my soapbox for the moment now.
Well, we always say it's like, we knock on wood when we say it, but when we talk to recruits, we say, if you roll your ankle, you break your ankle, or you tear your ACL, we don't ever want to have that happen. But if it does, are you going to be okay, with lacrosse out of that element? Like, do you want to go to school here? And we've had a really good retention rate. That's something we pride ourselves on. We've even had guys who've had season-ending injuries or career-ending injuries, and we find a role for them, whether they're helping us with our practice, sort of as a manager, or we've had guys be our PA and our personalities on our live streams. But we try to keep people involved, and that's important, I think, to creating great culture. And being 8 years into a program, it's exciting to kind of be at the ground floor up and kind of see that all develop.
Yeah.
But it's huge, and so I got to ask, which did you choose, NC State or North Carolina?
I went for the red and white. I was NC State guy through and through. Again, that would have been, 83? It was literally kindergarten. I remember the conversation. Like, I had, 3 guys walked up, and they're like, NC State or UNC, and it was just one of those, I was like, well, I like red. So, literally, that was the deciding factor. I was like, I like the red over the Carolina blue. Like, that was it. So, it's like, but then, so it's amazing the things
well,
that
as long
just
as you
stick
don't
with
come
you at
into
5 years old.
As long as you don't come into Lexington with Duke talk, with basketball, it gets a little, old lady in the street will be like, "Are you wearing a Duke basketball shirt?"
Yeah.
Which I love, because I'm a big Duke lacrosse fan. I've really enjoyed meeting a lot of their alumni, and just had an opportunity to meet Brendan Fowler once, and I was like, man, I'm a big Duke. Like, this seems like an awesome program, and they're doing such amazing things. And I was like, but I won't be wearing any Duke basketball shirts here in Kentucky. I don't need that type of torture. So
yeah, exactly. There's certain things you just got to be that closet fan at certain points.
Yeah.
So, it's easy for me to say NC State is a lacrosse guy, because even though I went to Mount St. Mary's, it's like but NC State is like, there's not a dog in that fight, so I can't really be accused of bias in any regard or anything like that. So it's like, for me, it's kind of nice that they don't really have a club program, or they have a club program, but not like a D1, D2, or D3. So I'm like, I get to keep myself separated from that a little bit. So we've talked about a lot, and I do kind of want to cover a couple other items here real quick. But another thing, like mostly players, is it almost is that I guess mystery, I'll say, as far as like how players kind of go about getting noticed. Like what gets your eye like on a recruit? Like what kind of stuff, and I know it's not one thing. I know players probably want it to be one specific thing that they do, but we know it's not. So like what are some things that a player can do to kind of get themselves noticed by a college coach?
Absolutely. So as far as just in the process of communicating your interest, we really emphasize the guys to continue to email us, let us know about their schedule. We definitely know guys we need to focus on if they're serious about playing Transylvania Lacrosse, that they're going to communicate. So emailing, any films, I love hearing about games, texting me and going, hey, I scored this many goals against our rival high school. I want to know about this stuff. I think it's awesome, and I think it's huge to build a relationship into who that young man is and give him an idea of who I am and as his coach. But as far as on the field, I tell our guys all the time it starts at warm-ups. And, there's nothing more infectious and nothing more exciting to see from the sidelines than someone who's positive. I watched an attackman. I was at a FLG in 3D this weekend in Delaware recruiting and coaching. And I watched a Midwestern team have a very good weekend. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that stood out was a young man who was an attackman was at the midline talking to his defense. So as the ball was on the opposite side, he was communicating. And I thought that's such an awesome, positive, high IQ, great teammate moment. Those are the guys I like, the guys who ride really hard that aren't throwing the silly checks for people to run by.
Right.
Knowing when to push and when to make a good decision are really important things, and just ground balls. I love seeing a guy come out of a scrum with a ground ball and just communicating on defense. So there's so many elements, but it does start at the warm-up. I like to watch guys warm up and see how dialed in they're getting. And if it's a loose, positive feel, I want to see how they react once they get on the field. And does that loose, positive feel bring them, a calmness to their team, or does it distract, and kind of reading the situation. So I really look for those moments. And, there's one thing I just always think about. I remember one time watching Mikey Powell on an ESPN game, in the Final Four, and he's walking around during warm-ups and they're filming him and all this. You can, like Leaf Elsmo's talking and describing the game, and his stick never left his collarbone.
Yeah.
So he was going through the warm-up and his stick was always there. He was never leaning on it and never dropped. And I remember as a young guy just being like, that's crazy. He's just always ready to catch the ball.
Yeah.
So little things like that on the field are huge. And there's something to be said about a guy, if you play attack, guess what? You're going to get checked. It's part of the game. It's going to be on your arms. It's going to be on your head. Are you going to be the guy who turns and talks to the ref? Or are you going to be the guy who plays through it, gets the flag, and then you score and be able to go man up right after it? And those are little things I really look for. And, that's why when you get to coach, you're just like, this is a really fun job because you get to watch those moments.
Yeah.
I can get long-winded on this, Mike, I'm telling you.
Oh, that'd be perfectly fine with me. One of the things I think I find most interesting, and I guess I have a little bit of luxury because a lot of times I do some of these podcasts, like I'll talk to 2 or 3 coaches in the span of a week, but it always gets me. And so like for the people that are listening to this, maybe in the span of like the couple weeks that it takes for me to publish them, it's always the little things. Like you mentioned the attackman talking to his defenders at the line. Like he's not running to the net and scoring a goal. He's not making, he's not trying to take on like 4 or 5 guys and leaving open players and stuff like that. Like I have never heard a coach tell me that they love the guy that, takes on the entire team to score the goal as the guy that they want on their team. Like they're looking for the smart player. It's always the little things that kind of gets your guys' attention. And I think I can't, again, stress that enough to like players. Like, you guys are always watching, and you're watching the stuff that's not necessarily happening on the field. You talk about Mikey Powell, with the stick, and he's always ready to catch. Funny enough, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and someone was relaying a story of Joe DiMaggio. It was in like a 13-0 game in the last week of the season when the Yankees had already clinched, the pennant at that point in time. And someone asked him, was like, why, and it was like he dove for a ground ball and really a nothing game, and they were like, why are you playing so hard, like when it really means nothing. He was like, there's someone out there that's seeing Joe DiMaggio play for the first time and maybe the only time. He's like, and I want this to be the impression that they get. And I think players can kind of take some of that to heart as well, because maybe the only time you get to see a guy play. And if that's the impression, like, what impression do they want to give you whenever they walk off the field? It's like, is it the guy's, the consummate teammate that does what it does to help the team win, or is it the guy that, barks at the ref because he's getting checked? Like, I mean, the players get to control that. Like, it's not your mom or your dad or your coach. Like, that's the stuff that they can control. So they get to, when they're on the field and between those lines and even, just off the lines, like, they get to decide, like, what your perception of them is. And I mean, I think that can be so impactful for you guys, because I mean, there's not a lot of difference between, the inside lacrosse, like 43 guy and the number 53 guy. Like,
right.
There's going to be little things that be like, I want that guy over that guy. And like, and you can't ever really say like what that exact thing was. Like, probably once it's recruiting, you can probably be like pinpoint it, but it's not going to be the same every year or every recruit. So I think that's something that recruits can take home. It's like, you get to control the perception that you put out there, and it may not be the thing you think like that, that is going to get the coach's attention. It may not be the goal. It may not be the assist. It may be standing at the midline, talking to the defender. It just gets that extra little look. Like, sometimes, and that's sometimes, I mean, not too different from life. Sometimes, when you get a job, it's something innocuous that you said, and you're like, oh, that's what did it. Like, you never know, but it's like, if you just being true to yourself and doing that, it can really help.
We had a tremendous goalie in my first couple years with the program named Cooper Fogel, and he was a Louisville native. And every goal, he would run out of the net to the face-off X and give a hug to the guy who scored. And it was just one of those things where oftentimes you're like, Coop, get back in the net so they can set the field. Like, don't get a delay. But his positivity was infectious. And it's those little things. I saw a young man this weekend while recruiting, I mean, threw a hammer of a check. And, at the college level, it might have been, let it fly. It was pretty close to hands, and I thought it was good. And they called it. And the young man looks at the attackman when the play ends, and he goes, I'm sorry, man, I was trying to get your hands, and walked off and went into the box. And I was like, that's the type of stuff you look for, is somebody who's just, doing the right thing, picking up an opponent if they're in the crease or something like that, or if they fall down out of bounds and there's a stoppage of play. There's just little things that you look for that are just energy boosters for a team. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, again, you could go long-winded. I probably could too, because I've heard so many stories over the years from coaches, and it's I'm not going to say it's never happened, but very rarely does a coach ever say it's that, because, and again, I'm sure you see it all the time too. Like, I've seen guys go, they got 3-on-1, and I'm like, you got two teammates standing there with nobody within 10 yards of them. It's like, you're not impressing anybody. Even if you score, you probably you probably had the opposite effect that you might think you're doing. So it's worth keeping in mind whenever you're trying to. Everybody wants a smart player. Like,
right.
It's like you got to have that lacrosse IQ. It's like, read your situation, and that goes not only in the game, but just kind of what's going on with you, and what I think a couple coaches have said, control your controllables. I think it was Coach Zolchanik from Wagner mentioned that, and like that was something he kept going back to, and it's worth saying. It's like, there's a lot of things you can't control in this recruiting process, but the one thing you can is the stuff you do on the field and the perception that you're providing coaches. And again, maybe the only time you get to see them, and that's you want to make sure like you have your opportunity. Like, if you ever want to play at Transylvania, like, you want to make sure that you're like, oh yeah, I saw him, I liked him.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to be like, oh. And kind of the evaluation part, and I think this is probably a perfect question for you, because obviously being in a non-hotbed area, I think Kentucky's one of the areas that it seems to be growing. Probably with programs like Transylvania kind of building up. I always think that helps to have like the college thing, because I think in high school sports, a lot of stuff trickles down from the professional level. Like, kids see that, and then they want to emulate the people, and I think it helps that passion of like, oh, I want to do this. But for the kids in Kentucky, or just non-hotbed areas in general, like, is the recruiting process, like, is the getting noticed process, any different in this day and age with technology and stuff like that than it may be for a kid in the East Coast or Long Island, like we mentioned?
There are so many great guys who have really built up Kentucky lacrosse, and there's a lot of groundwork that has been laid by those guys. I mean, Scott Howe at St. Xavier High School has really built a program that's, a Midwest player and is always pushing themselves. They take a trip out to Virginia every spring break.
Mm-hmm.
And, Chase Carrero went to Denver and played out there and for Coach Tierney and really, a huge part of putting Kentucky on the map. Coach Howe's done a lot for Louisville. And then Pete Schroeder at Trinity, that's another program that's really done well. And there's just so many coaches. Coach Justice, our head coach, actually we call him the godfather of Central Kentucky lacrosse. He's been a huge part of the University of Kentucky men's club, and then, started the high school programs, which divided up. And so there's so many guys who have laid the groundwork, and there's a lot of clubs popping up too. I mean, our club, Commonwealth Kings, I love, being a part of that growth and helping guys develop their IQ. And then, Howland Hounds in Louisville with Joe Ritchie and Larry Felinsky. And L4 is a great program with Reed Wesley and Dylan Gatt. They're doing great things for all these young men and young people trying to get into lacrosse.
Mm-hmm.
So it's huge. The one thing about me, moving around the Midwest, I'm just so jealous I didn't get to play box lacrosse as a kid because it's starting to really blow up.
Yeah.
But, getting seen and the opportunities that those club coaches in high schools and all the coaches in the state can provide, there's little elements. I always think it's good to have film.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell our guys all the time in the program, I don't need, coaches don't want to see your 9-minute every goal that you scored, within the first minute and a half. That's probably as much as they're going to see at the most. So put your good plays, your hustle plays, everything in there. Communicate with those coaches and send them emails and get yourself on their radar. And then, with all these teams that are traveling in the summers and the winter and fall, there's great opportunities to go play against really, really good programs. I mean, I think L4 was out at Inside Lacrosse last weekend.
Mm-hmm.
The Kings were at FLG. I know Howland Hounds were in Maryland as well. I think they're at an Aloha event. So, I think it's always good for these young men to go out there and play some of these East Coast teams because, one, the speed and just a little bit of the little things really come into play.
Yeah.
When you're playing some of these more traditional teams. If you miss a ground ball, it can be the one goal in transition that really bites you. And sometimes when you're playing high school, you can miss a ground ball and it might be against a weaker team and it doesn't bite you. So I think the summer and fall events do a huge part of us seeing a different speed for our young guys.
Yeah.
And just getting out there and playing. I had more than a few coaches come up to us at FLG and go, wait a minute, you guys are from Kentucky? Like, what? And I know that's happening with a lot of these guys as they go to showcases or they play summer or fall lacrosse.
Yeah.
It's just, getting out there and communicating to those coaches that come by. And I always said this, Ben, our other director who I've talked about a few times, he always said that, his coach at Jacksonville told him, we will find the guys that are ready for this level. There's so many opportunities. Just keep putting yourself out there, and picking the right ones.
Yeah, and I have to imagine, like, with you mentioned the film or YouTube. I know probably some of the kids probably were like, "Why do they say film?" Like, it's not something
right.
like showing our age a little bit.
Right there.
But because I did grow up in the age when like coaches used to have the VHS tapes and they'd put them in. They always used to tell me they used to take out the audio jack of the VHS too because they didn't want to hear the music. So that's not a new thing. Like if kids have a couple coaches have told me about the music the kids choose, and I'm like, that's not new. Like that's been going on for decades. Like the kids choose the music and the coaches take it, put it on mute now, but it used to take out the red and white jack so they couldn't, or red and yellow jack so they couldn't hear it. I have to imagine like with the film, and you mentioned it earlier, like that being such a big part of kids being able to get seen because that's a way they could email you an email of the film and then say like, hey, I'm going to be at the FLG in 3D this weekend. And at least that way you kind of have a familiarity with the player and kind of get an idea. of, is this a player you want to look at a little bit deeper, a little bit harder?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so many platforms and ways to market yourself. I just think it's a really cool thing for young people to be able to get this information at their fingertips. I mean, we've got two young men on our roster that are from Portland, Oregon, from Sherwood High School, and they've been tremendous players for us. And I've never been to Portland, Oregon, so it was all through the opportunity to catch them at a few events and see their film, and it's really been a pretty special opportunity to coach those guys. So, you take advantage of it. I mean, at the same time, I also think a lot of young people get rushed by the amount of technology and social media, because I can't tell you how many of my kids go, oh, geez, everyone's committing. Why haven't I committed? And I'm like, just take your visits and relax. Go experience the process. But, it's a gift and a curse. But I definitely think it's really cool to be able to, live stream a recruit's game in central Pennsylvania or watch them play football. I mean, you just didn't have those opportunities. I actually have my highlight reel. It was VHS that I mailed in manila envelope to all the offices. I had to find out their exact addresses and everything. So it's some real dinosaur type stuff in my house right there.
Yeah,
so I don't know if I'll ever let my team see it.
Yeah, the pain that kids nowadays will never know. Like, finding an email is not hard at all anymore. Like trying to find the address and the coach and all that, so make sure it gets to the right place. And then, just making a copy of a VHS. Like I remember what that was. I remember like when we first got the dual VHS thing where you could hit, put one in and record at the same time. Like that felt mind blowing at the time. Again, we are really aging ourselves now. Kids are probably like, what?
Do you remember E-Lacrosse? Do you remember that?
No.
There was E-Lacrosse was just like a website where it was like you'd stream like maybe 3-minute clips of games, and it'd be like, oh, I hear the MIAA final has some clips, and it'd be like 4 clips. You get the dial up going and watch it and be like, oh, this is so awesome, Yeah, we really are. I'm going to stop there.
Yeah. People are going to start seeing us, that guy, that meme from, the old man shouting at the cloud, but like, you'll never know the pain. Like, we're one step away from saying we walked, uphill in the snow both ways.
Yes. So, exactly.
But yeah, I think it is an advantage of technology having made the world maybe a little bit smaller. Because I don't think I would have guessed. I didn't look at your guys' roster before we started talking. I don't think I would have guessed 2 kids from Portland, Oregon would end up in a D3 school in Kentucky.
Right.
Because that's just again, Oregon's one of those areas that like they're about as far from the East Coast as you're gonna get. So and I know you guys aren't in the East Coast, but it's like
right.
They probably went to a lot of those recruiting camps that we were talking about to get out there and get noticed, and they probably put in a lot. They definitely put in a lot of freaking flyer miles. But I think like you mentioned the film, like that can help. Like you have there's tools out there that can kind of make the world a little bit smaller and kind of help you get noticed maybe a little bit more. But I think the non-hotbed kids, like, unfortunately, you may have to work a little bit harder to get that attention than maybe a kid on the East Coast, because I know, you guys can probably go to a high school game during the season, but you're probably not getting to a Portland, Oregon game during the high school season. Yeah. So it's like those kids. It's the reality situation until I think our sport grows to a point where you're like Division I football, where they're everywhere.
Right.
That's just kind of be the reality of the situation. Like if you're in one of those, you're Utah or in Oregon or something like that, you might have to put in a little bit more work than maybe a kid from Baltimore or Long Island does. But that's also like if you want it bad enough, it's kind of the nature of the sport, and it probably not a bad test for playing college athletics either, because college ain't easy, so you're gonna have to do a little bit more work there too. So it's it separates the players a little bit as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
And kind of wrapping up, kind of separating yourself is pretty good. We've talked about a lot of the athletic things, but what's some non-athletic factors that feature heavily in the D3 recruiting process?
Of course, grades are really important. So, everything is merit based at the Division III level. So, grades are just a real deal breaker, and usually a lot of people don't realize. They kind of look at the price tag of Division III schools, and they don't realize how much opportunity there is for a reduced rate because of merit opportunities and financial aid. So I always tell our guys, even if you're worried about it, you should apply and go take a visit, because there's a lot of academic money to go around at these schools if you can do the work and you put in the schoolwork and you do the classroom element. But I love a player who's a leader, who has leadership opportunities, well-rounded. Anybody who's a captain is always huge. And we've had a few Eagle Scouts, guys involved in so many different programs. And I think, that gives a different element to your team. We try to do in our recruitment really about 50% of our team, we try to make it in-state. So we have a lot of Lexington, Louisville, and occasionally Northern Kentucky. And then we look to build the other 50% of out-of-state so we can create a team that really gives opportunities for guys to expand and their friendships and who they've played with. And that's been a unique element, and that's the same way in the recruitment. We're looking for guys that are captains, guys with different backgrounds, to make our team a unique culture and a unique team to be around and create kind of a solid program right there. Yeah. So if that makes sense, I mean, I really, we've got we talk about the C's in our program, which is community, classroom, communication, competition, commitment. All those things are really important to us. And the more leadership opportunities you have, we encourage our guys to do. A lot of our guys are in FCA on campus. A lot of guys do the SAC Leadership of Athletes program. Our guys are studying abroad. All those things are really important, I think, for just creating a team of guys who can all work together and see different perspectives.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's always one of those things, like it's different for every program as far as because again, it depends on I think it's probably, I have to imagine, maybe not year to year, but every couple of years, like you're looking to fill certain spots, like maybe your captain graduating, like, he was the motor guy and the real leader and the glue of the team. Like we don't have another guy like that maybe in the pipeline, but we look for, I mean, you always want a leader. I mean, I don't think any team is going to say we have too many well, I don't know. Too many guys that want to be the leaders. I mean, I guess at some point you need some soldiers that step in line. But so maybe that was a bad analogy. But I think you get my gist. Like sometimes you need some players to plug holes that fit this stuff. So I mean, I think for every program and for every, maybe even every level, like those factors are going to be a little bit different. I think there's still some. You mentioned like the C's and the character and the community. Like some of that stuff is it's still important. Like I think that's a beautiful thing about athletics is players learn a lot about that stuff, like putting the team above the individual and stuff like that. Like there's stuff you learn through athletics, and I think that just kind of speaks to the kind of players that most coaches are trying to get. So just to really finish up here, and I am going to pin you down on one because I know it's not one thing, but what's the number one thing a recruit can do to kind of make themselves the most recruitable player possible, like to give themselves the best opportunity to say, hey, I want to go to Transylvania. I want to make sure Coach Otto knows I want to go there and are interested. Like, what's the one thing that they can do to make sure that that they want to be recruited?
I feel like I sound like a broken record, but I just continue to stress communication. So we really, appreciate when young men email us and say, hey, I really want to be a part of your program. This is who I am. This is where I'm going. So communication is essential. It's something we're really looking for. And then, that's going to definitely get your foot in the door for us to see you and make a commitment to come see you. I mean, we will make you a priority if you show the interest in our school, because we believe you're going to play really hard and give us all you have to be here.
Yeah.
So that's a huge part of it. I think if you're really serious about a program and what they're building and what they're doing, you need to let them know. And that goes a long way for me.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, and I kind of do want to elaborate on the email a little bit, because it comes up a number of times in conversation. Sure. Like, what kind of stuff should? First we'll get what should a player not do in that initial contact email?
My big thing is, because sometimes we're going to see a lot of guys, and we're going to reach out and create that interest, because I can tell you there's a lot of young men that I've emailed that are on this team, and they're going, I didn't know Transylvania University existed, right? So, you kind of create that opportunity for us as a program to recruit them. So I always tell guys all the time, if you're not interested, you do your research. It doesn't seem like the right fit. Please let us know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we won't take offense to that because we want to recruit people who are interested in us. There's no need to string along any coaching staff for a long period of time. So we understand that. Just be polite. I think the big thing is for what I want to see in an email is always, GPA, some of the background of what they're doing in school and their interests academically, what they're thinking about majoring. I know, I majored in English.
Mm-hmm.
If you would have told me that when I was 16, I would have been like, you're crazy, man. But I ended up wanting to be an English teacher and a high school lacrosse coach. But, giving us a background of what you're interested in and what position you're wanting to play. I always like the film, and, I always like getting a coach's contact info so I can contact them and say, hey, what is this young man like?
Yeah.
When can we get an opportunity to discuss how you feel about his play and how he is as a teammate? So, I definitely think it would be really hard to mess it up in a sense. I think you would have to come in with definitely a bad tone to really throw it off, because usually it's pretty easy to get us engaged to look at that and go, okay, this guy's really interested. I have a horror story of one of my buddies was college coaching, and a kid emailed him back and said, hey, don't know your program, but I'm the next Paul Rabel. And that's all he said.
Oh,
and
wow.
So yeah. And he showed it to me and he goes, man, can you believe this? And sure enough, he eventually went and talked to their director and said, hey, I just want to let you know this came back. You just don't want to be that guy. Just let us know if you're not interested. And most of the time we're going to say, okay, best of luck. And great, thanks for giving us the opportunity.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely one of those stories where you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe.
Yeah.
So etiquette and tone is really important. As an English teacher, I always tell guys, look over your email and make sure you understand your spelling, right?
Yeah.
I've received an email before that has said, hey, coach, not my last name. I'm so interested in not the university you coach at.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, oh, tough go,
Yeah.
You're just like, well, I get it. You meant to send that to me. So I always tell guys, reread it, double check. It's just like turning in an essay, because you might be writing in a stream of consciousness and you're typing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you realize you have a misspelling. So that's probably my biggest thing. The most English teacher response you could get from me.
I mean, I could echo that as well as someone who's, been a reporter for the majority of his career, someone who's written and it happens I'll be typing something and my mind's thinking of something else. The next thing you know, I'm typing it, or the other way, like I'm typing something and I say something else. It's like your mind kind of gets that flip. And so it does happen. And, I always and I'm sure with recruits, if they're emailing several colleges, I always suggest take a break, write 3 or 4 if you're interested in the programs, do them right, take your time, because again, it's that first impression, it's that little thing, that something you can control. If you need to, write them all and then wait a day or two before you hit send, and then look them over when you're fresh and not having sit there, because all the kids you guys are going to school all the time, you got practice, you got all this other stuff going on. It's very easy to just kind of make that mistake, and you don't want to burn a bridge. Our sport is small enough that, still it's you don't want to burn a bridge, because that stuff can kind of get around and be like, oh yeah, this kid sent me the wrong email too. You send the wrong email to you with the other coach's name next thing you guys are at recruitment, he sent your email to me. It's just not the reputation the player want to get. So as someone who has written, I will write emails or I will write letters or something like that, and I will step back and be like, I'm going to wait. And, I'm going to read this tomorrow. I'm going to take an hour and read it in an hour. I'm going to go eat dinner, go have a snack, go take a shower, whatever it is, take that break. It's amazing how much that little bit of time will help just kind of clear the cache on your brain and let you look at it with a fresh set of eyes. I mean,
I always tell kids all the time, I wish you guys would get email etiquette class, because every once in a while they'll send one and I'm like, are you mad at me? Because it's just a very, very simple, just one sentence, and I'm like, are we good? What's going on here?
Yeah.
but that's a great thing. And we tell our guys a lot of times, I mean, I always found this to be really important for me as a student athlete was studying, take an hour, study, take that half an hour off, and you'll digest a lot more. You'll absorb a lot more of that material. You don't need to do 1 hour, 2 hours off.
Right.
But I think that's really great advice, Mike, to a lot of young people because you never know if you're going to say something that may be misconstrued. And once you hit send on anything, social media, any of that stuff, it's definitely something where you really have to play the game to get that kind of erased. It's just tough to erase once you hit send.
Yeah, you don't want to put yourself in a corner right off the bat.
Sure.
Like you don't have to dig yourself out of that hole. So, but Coach, before I let you go, like I'm sure there's people they've been listening to this, they really want to know where they can find out more about the Transylvania program. So, like online, like where they find you online, on social, like how should they get in touch with you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. So transysports.com, we've got plenty of information on there. If anyone's ever interested in our program, it's got all of our email addresses and things like that to contact us, and student athlete questionnaire things. And then on Twitter, Transy-Lax, Transylvania shortened, Transy_Lax, and then we have an Instagram account, Transylvania Lax as well. So yeah, check us out, shoot us a follow, and Coach Justice is on there too. I'm on there as well. I'm Laudeman Empire as on the old Instagram, so I'm kind of figuring that stuff out and enjoying it. So it's just a lot of pictures of my French bulldog, but yeah, it's good stuff. So thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it, and I'm going to continue listening and enjoying all the stuff you're offering to parents, players, and coaches. This is just awesome.
Well, I appreciate it, Coach. Thank you so much, and I like the Instagram handle. That you got a good one there. Like, I'm always jealous when I hear some of the people that they worked their name into. I was like, man, if my last name was a little bit different, like that's so cool. So that one's cool. I like that one.
Thanks, Mike. I'll take it, man. I'll take it.
All right, Coach. Well, you have a good evening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right.